Okay, so this is the session about how safe are nuclear power plants are okay. Well, I'm sure you have already read the paragraph in this nice brochure, and it says that nuclear power plants generate 30% of the total electricity in Republic of Korea, and we have a high population density in a small area, and we have a strong awareness of the potential hazard of both nuclear criticality and release of radioactivity materials from nuclear power plants. And recently, rampant corruption within the nuclear industry has been broadcasted by the media and dropped public credibility. So, according to this paragraph, this panel will discuss the safety capacity of ROK's nuclear power plant in its design, equipment, and safety management, and also address the public concern on nuclear safety. And this is quite a timely and interesting issue. And as someone who is living outside of the country and has a connection with still keeping the connection with ROK, I also am very much interested in this topic and would like to get some good view about this topic today. So I'm going to play a role of Ray person to ask questions to experts sitting next to me, and I'd like to conduct this session like that. So let me introduce the speakers briefly first. Left to me is Dr. Kim Ji-yoon. She's a director of the Public Opinion Studies Center at the Asan Institute for Public Studies. She is a lecturer at Concordia University, Sungmyung Women's University, and Chung-Ang University. Her research interests include elections and voting behavior, political economy, distributive policies in multi-ethnic societies, American political development, political methodology, and Korean politics. And she's also an author of Political Judgment, Perceptions of Facts and Partisan Effects, and Pacific spending, public spending, and public deficits and government coalition. So we expect that she would give her view from societal side. Next to Dr. Kim is Dr. Lee Jong-in. He's a senior advisor of Korea Institute of Nuclear Safety, and is a vice president in the Office of Radiation and Radiowaste Safety. He's a president of the Korean Nuclear Society and pioneered the development of the key Korean severe accident policy. So we have a good real expert of the nuclear safety issue here. Last but not least, the leftmost from me is Professor Soo-Keun Yoo, professor at Seoul National University. He's vice president of the Korean Nuclear Society, so we have both president and vice president of academia here, so the most powerful selection. Chair of the Korea section of American Nuclear Society, and commissioner of the Korean Nuclear Utilization and Development Committee. So I think this is the most competent group of experts of nuclear safety issue for Korean nuclear capability. So it's kind of awkward for me to do this, but before starting this discussion, let me try to give some framework for this discussion, and we will let them express their views about 7 minutes accordingly. So I think, as this paragraph says, the safety issue will include first the design issue, the reactor design issue. And this is pretty much about the robustness of the engineering system, the reactor. The second point of discussion would be operation, how well we can, how safely we can operate the reactor. And this is about the competence and the leadership of operators and operating companies. The third point would be the regulation. The regulation should have some level of independency and will involve the topics of regulatory system as well as regulatory method. So this would involve these points. Recently, in the aftermath of Fukushima, we observed that the failure of Japanese regulatory system did result from the so-called regulatory capture issue, meaning the utilities company is more competent than the regulatory body, so that, in a sense, the regulatory body was under the control of the utilities. So this is an independence issue. The fourth point would be the mitigation and the emergency plans. When something happened, how can we cope? Well, whether we can cope with that situation. So when we talk about the safety, those things would be within the scope of discussion. But even if we have such a good system and good operator and good regulatory system, and we have a good plan, it's probably not enough because situations change with time, internally and externally. So can we anticipate the changing shape of risk before failure occurs? Can we reframe a model of how safety is created before accidents occur? Those kind of proactive foresight would be very much required. One thing, as a couple of examples would be the aging issue. Reactor ages over the time. So even if we have a good system now, when reactors are all relatively young, over the time we have evolving issues. Can these systems meet those variability in the situation? Another example might be cyber attack, for example. It has never been considered when we started the nuclear power in 1960s or 70s, but now it seems a reasonable concern for the safety issue. So all these are the things that we need to consider to keep the reactor operation, reactors safe in a kind of normal conditions. But what would be the scenarios for severe accidents in Korea? Here I would say, don't ever say it's impossible for an accident to occur in Korea. That's the same mistake that we observed in Japan, that's so-called absolute safety issue. Okay, so we have to expand our imagination and think about what kind of things could happen. And So far, we had a human error triggered accident, system failure issue, and a natural disaster accident like Fukushima. But what about the future? What kind of trigger scenario would be possible? Maybe malicious intent, terrorism, something like that? I don't know. But all these considerations, analysis would be very much required. And even if we do such a good discussions and analysis for future accidents, unfortunately, accident will happen sometime in the future. Are we prepared for an accident? I think we need to develop a picture of an accident, including inside and outside. What's going on? What will be happening inside and outside? Again, observing Fukushima, there was a substantial lack of view about what's happening outside, particularly when the accident was actually ongoing. So we need to develop such a whole picture of an accident. But what do we need to do for that? Outside means environment and people's life, business, and community. Do we include such considerations when we discuss the safety? From the very scientific point of view, do we know how radionuclides would exist and migrate in the surrounding environment? For example, if Kori nuclear power plant has an accident, do we know in detail how radionuclides would behave in the surrounding environment? We didn't know at all about Fukushima and surrounding environment and radionuclide issue in Fukushima. So all these are being done right now. What kind of damages, impacts are anticipated? Again, our safety was considered within the framework of dose rate, and that is basically potential casualty number. But is that enough? And again, we need an emergency plan. But will emergency plan work? Right after the Fukushima accident happened, I downloaded the chart of communication system among municipalities, government, and TEPCO. That website was quietly eliminated right after the accident. But I was shocked to see how complicated that information path was. It's almost like a spaghetti, and there's no way of successfully done that kind of complicated communication in such an emergency situation. So do we have a good plan, workable plan for the emergency situation? And all these will, I'm sure, closely connected with public concern. Unless we respond to these things, the public would have a reasonable concern. And do we have enough human resources for doing such a wide range of considerations? We need a human resources development. And I think that is also closely related to the public trust, public acceptance factor. So that's what I thought. And I thought this is a great opportunity for us to ask questions to the experts about the safety issue for Korean nuclear powers. I just gave you some framework of thinking. I'm sure there are lots of other factors for considering the safety, and I'm very much expecting you to give such an additional points of views and comments after these presentations. So with that, I'd like to pass the time for Dr. Kim, please.
Well, thank you, Professor An. First of all, it is my great pleasure to be here with all those exceptionally famous experts in the field. And well, as Professor An introduced, I'm not an expert in the nuclear energy or nuclear but I'm just a pollster, and I'm in charge of the Public Opinion Studies Center at the Asan Institute. And we recently conducted the opinion survey on the nuclear energy, not the nuclear weapons of the North Korea, in November 2012. And the result and how the Korean public the field and they have an opinion about nuclear energies in Korea, and also as well as the nuclear power plants, which I'm going to present here today. Well, as we all know, that after the Fukushima accident in 2011, the safety issue of the nuclear power plants has became very important around the world. And numerous countries actually expedited their phasing out the nuclear power plants, or even decided to terminate and shut down all the nuclear power plants in their country. And this is not the thing actually we can observe in Korea. So it's first important to note that Korean people generally have a very accommodating view about the nuclear energy. So when we asked about, well, do you think it is acceptable or do you approve using the nuclear energy to generate electricity, and 75% of Korean public said yes. So you can see how accommodating the attitude they have. And when we asked, so do you think it's necessary to have nuclear energy? And even higher number, like 87% of Koreans said yes, it is necessary to have nuclear energy. So, well, I mean, the primary reasons for Korean people to think that way comes from first, because of the energy independence, and secondly, they think it's economically profitable. Well, there's some small number of people who actually oppose to the nuclear energy, but they are, of course, worried about the safety issue and the radiation leak. But in general, well, Korean people have a rather welcoming view and attitude toward the nuclear energy and power plants. One thing more interesting is a change of climate toward building more nuclear plants in the country. So after Fukushima, in April 2011, we also conducted the survey, the special survey on the nuclear power plants and Korean people's attitude toward it. So when we asked the people that, do you agree or disagree that building additional nuclear power plants in the country, it is right after the Fukushima accident. And at that time, 55% of Koreans said, well, they opposed to building new ones. But almost the same number, like 57% of Koreans answered, but they do not really want to, shut down all the facilities in Korea. So basically, they prefer the status quo. So do not build more, but do not shut down either. When we asked the same question this time, November 2012, which is exactly 1.5 years past the Fukushima accident, the position rate has dropped by 10%. So about 45% of Koreans said, well, they actually opposed to building new nuclear plants, but instead, 50% of Koreans actually said, well, they approve of building new and additional nuclear power plants in the country. So the tragic memory of Fukushima accident in the neighboring country, it was certainly is fading out. Of course, it has the variations. When we respondents were asked, well, then do you agree with building a nuclear power plant in your neighborhood? Then, of course, the support rate dropped for the natural reason. So about 35% of Korean people say, yeah, it's fine to have a nuclear power plant in my neighborhood. But of course, 63% opposed to it. So it is very much likely not in my backyard phenomenon. But one interesting thing I found was that it depends on what kind of occupation you have. So white collars, the housewives, those the highly educated people are more likely to oppose. But those who are working in the first industry, like the farmers and the fisheries, the relatively poor sector of the population, they tend to agree and they tend to approve the idea of having the nuclear power plants in their neighborhood, and also followed by blue-collar workers. So you can see the industry-wise and the socio-economic, demographic-wise, the differences. So the result, this result of the survey, and also combined with yesterday's Dr. Harm's remark before in the beginning of the gala dinner, it seems like Korean people are nuke-loving people. Like we would like to use the nuclear energy, and as well as we like to have the nuclear weapons from both North and South. But it should not be taken at face value, because Korean people are much likely, very much turned out to be wary of the safety issue of the nuclear power plants in the country. And then they are not really the 100% of assured of its capacity, the country's capacity of having it. So for example, when you ask the safety of the nuclear power plants in Korea, so do you think the nuclear power plant in Korea is safe? And then more than a majority, like 55% of Korean people felt it's unsafe. So they said, no, I don't think it's safe. And what's more intriguing is that relatively high proportion of those who approved actually using the nuclear energy to generate electricity, 47% of them said that it is unsafe. So they approved of using it, but they do not really feel it's safe. And also 50%, 51% to be exact, of Korean people who actually answered that it is necessary to have nuclear energy, of course, but 51% of them actually felt it is unsafe. So even though they think it is necessary and it should be used, but they actually have an unsafe feeling toward the nuclear power plants. And this uncomfortable feeling comes from first, the lack of transparency in the management process when in the event of the nuclear accident. So there's no detailed report of why it happened and then how it happened and how it's resolved and what is the future plan like to prevent it from happening again. So they actually very much feel it's not sufficient information about it. And secondly, they do not have strong trust in the personnel who are actually working at the nuclear plants, and they think they are not sufficiently aware of how important it is to the safety of the nuclear power plants. While a similar attitude is observed on the radioactive waste disposal facilities too, so almost the same percent of people, like 54% of Koreans answered this, they do not really feel safe. But despite the fact that the Koreans have relatively unsafe feeling toward the nuclear plants, but they have high trust in the nuclear technology. So 60% of Koreans said, well, they are confident in the technology itself. In particular, when it comes to government policy relating to nuclear safety, they showed quite the distrust, basically. Well, this is actually goes very well with the result that we had in 2011 April. After the Fukushima accident, the Korean government stated that the nuclear power reactors in Korea are safe, and we are dealing with it very well. And then when we asked, do you believe what the government said? And the public showed that no. More than 60% of Korean public said no, they don't really believe what the government said, and they do not really think the Korean nuclear power plants are safe. Similar the findings we have this time too. So 60% of the Korean people actually answered that, well, we don't really trust the government policy relating to the nuclear power plants and nuclear reactors and safety policies too. And one thing interesting is that, well, it is quite a partisan or political issue too. So those who support the Saenuri Party, which is the incumbent party of Korea, more than 60%, 64% of Saenuri Party supporters have higher trust in the government policies. But 57% of the Democratic United Party, which is a major opponent party of Korea, they said they do not really trust the government policy. So it can be very politicized and partisan issue. So amidst the global sort of anti-nuclear energy sentiment and the movement, the Koreans have relatively displayed a strong support for the nuclear power plants itself. But I think it doesn't really come along with the safety issue. They do not really believe it is safe, and they have a little trust in the government policy. So it should not be, the result itself should not be taken as face value. So it is not really true that Korean people are nuke loving, basically. Then why this kind of result we see is, first of all, well, as we all know, the Korean people are very much focused on the developmental philosophy, the economic development, the profitability is very important. For example, when he asked, do you support the idea of the export of nuclear power plants to UAE? And then the 75% of Korean people said, yes, we support it because it is, economically profitable. So that is one reason. And secondly, I think the more important reason is that the government and the political parties in Korea didn't really adopt the issue that seriously. And particularly, no major party in Korea adopting the nuclear issue as a main political agenda. I mean, there's slight differences, which party do you support and which candidate in the presidential election, because the survey was done before the election. Which presidential candidate is supporting or disapprove the nuclear power plant. There was slight differences, but we don't really see much of the importance of it. So we don't have a Green Party is very actively working. We don't have a Socialist Party actively working, and most of the environmental issue during the Lee Myung-bak government was focused on the Fall River project. Not the nuclear power plant issue wasn't really risen up as an important one. So at this point, what we needed, more information should be provided for the public, and the government has a highly responsible for the safety issue and assure the Korean people reasonably they are doing the policy. Because, for example, when we asked what would be the ideal, the new replaceable energy sources, then the 64% of Koreans chose another one than the nuclear energy, like the wind and solar energy. So it also shows that they have a relatively lack of confidence in nuclear energy and its safety, but they are just taking it because it's second optimal. So to assure of the safety issue, to get the trust and confidence from the public, I think it's time for the government to be more active. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you. So let me move on to Dr. Lee, please.
So thank you, and also thank you, Kim. From the point of view, could indicate for public opinion. Okay, today's subject: how safe are nuclear power plant in South Korea? I tell you what are we doing for safety. I just say in regulatory side. Yeah. Mr. An already mentioned it, operation, design, and radiation protection, what are doing. But I say the key point here, status. Second, what is first priority for using nuclear energy? Third, how to resolve safety issues. And also in conclusion there. In Korea has endeavoring to promote peaceful and safe uses of nuclear energy under the basic national policy to meet the energy demand. And also at present we have 23 nuclear power plants in operation and 5 units under construction. Around more than 30% is generated from the nuclear energy. Yeah, Korea keep doing consistent and comprehensive nuclear reactor development program, and also regulatory program and strategy for new reactor licensing until doing. And also that we have carried out nuclear power program with the international cooperation, close technical cooperation, and with IAEA and advanced countries. Also, this is, in nuclear energy facility, access to level of international safety standard. We have also good safety record. Second, what is the first priority for using nuclear energy? The nuclear safety policy, we have principle priority to safety, aim to protect public health and safety from radiation. Everybody you know that. And also we have the 5 principles for nuclear safety regulation. The independence, openness, efficiency, clarity, and reliability. We have to keep doing now. And also regulatory action are effective, realistic, and timely. And especially the regulatory paradigm shift implies following concerns: the CBA action policy, also use of PSA and the adoption of risk-informed regulation. Also, we are technical standard will continue improve, develop to conform high level of nuclear safety and successfully apply to the licensing our nuclear power plant. Third, how to resolve safety issues. TMI in 1978, there are made a great impact on safety regulation. We have complete inspection was carried out, and also lots of items were identified and implemented of the TMI action plan. Everybody don't know. But now, 2 years ago, Fukushima, immediately after Fukushima in Korea, we are in 24-hour radiation emergency response team, so operation by the expert group, McKinsey. And also President of Korea ordered whole check the nuclear reactor in Korea and the Japan nuclear crisis after that. As a result of check, more than 50 action items were identified for the implementation and also being implemented in the area of tsunami, seismic safety, and also prevention of severe accident, also minimize of radioactive release to the environment, the key point, and also strengthen the emergency plan. A great deal of experience and lessons learned were obtained in connection with the Fukushima crisis. We are improving the international competence of domestic nuclear power plant safety. In addition, the leaders of China, Japan, and South Korea will cooperate to promote the nuclear safety. The nuclear safety also will promote come together among nuclear safety experts. That's the important thing to neighboring country. Moreover, we are seeking to learn of the new knowledge and experience, both internationally and domestically. Must be fundamental feature of the safety culture of the Korean nuclear industry. That's the important thing. Also, 2 years ago, after Fukushima, our government requested to the IAEA, the Integrated Regulatory Review Service was conducted. And that team, IAEA team, evaluated Korea's response and countermeasures against the Fukushima accident. Was applied prompt and effective. Also, communication with the people, development of action for improvement and coordination with international will assess the high quality. Also, IRS team identified several good points and also identified some issue items to improve. Before my conclusion, the safe, how safe? The definition of safe, when you go to internet, just check. This is not strict engineering term. I think this is social term. But you know, the designer, nuclear power designer, or every designer, try to think of everything. And you know, in engineering safety, we adopt the concept of depends in depth concept, and also we get a sufficient safety margin. All these things we think about the design-based accident and including severe accident. Also minimize radiation protection and limit a lot of concept as low as reasonable achievable. This is the engineering term. But another point of view that safety is a social term. Yeah. And then I just in conclusion that in the course of conducting the various nuclear projects and also considering safety issues such as feedback operating experience and also lessons learned from accident, TMI and Fukushima and any other accident we'll take care. We believe nuclear safety can be assured by combination of such effort. It's not one term, as asking nuclear facility physically sound and safe, and also reinforcing safe attitude of people and organization involved through the promotion of safety culture. Once more, Korea, our government, be making effort for global nuclear safety with strong commitment to international safety regime. We always keep in mind how safe is safe enough. Now, we'll continue the effort to improve nuclear safety in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you. So, please, Professor
Ladies
Su.
and gentlemen, I realize I'm sitting in the wrong kind of seat here. Everybody's already given his or her remarks. So I got, looks like I got two options. Just walk out of the room, or try to entertain you from the floor, or thirdly, make a sound anyway, okay? And the other thing is that I never ever give a lecture the same as the material. So forget about the material, whatever you have, I already forget. And so, please bear with me. If it comes to nuclear safety, then I probably have to make clear that at least I've got half a dozen items to touch upon. And 6 items are apparently much more than my CPU as well as memory. So Galaxy is my last resort. So first of all, I think that even though I missed several sessions yesterday, there's a growing concern that DPRK has apparently become de facto nuclear power. And also there might be a what they call nuclear domino, okay, where Japan as well as Taiwan might be moving forward to developing and deploying their own nuclear arsenal, as well as us, for example. So, as far as I can see it, this is a new threat, which never been considered seriously, nowhere in the world. And as you know that we are, the Republic of Korea is in a very particular place. We're really confronting the northern part, okay? And they're, again, moving forward with perhaps more or additional testing within a matter of a day or weeks, I don't know. But anyway, that's something. As I see it, it's a clear present danger. It's no more noise, it's a clear present danger we have to be facing. And I was just thinking about the missile launch to one of those nuclear sites, okay? That's good enough for the short-range missile to get to. Actually, Seoul is not in a good position to take nuclear missiles. We're too close, okay? But nuclear sites, Gori, Hwasong, Wujin, Yeonggwang, those are better, much better place. It's perfect timing, perfect distance. So my concern is that apart from aircraft impact, perhaps A380, isn't it, the biggest bird in the world? A380. We have to be thinking about this nuclear attack. And you know what? The dreadful thing about this incident is that it could be acting like a real dirty bomb. You know what dirty bomb is? Okay? Just hits the site and what's in there, nuclear fuel, in the reactor, in the containment, spent fuel pool, they're totally vulnerable. There's nothing. We're totally defenseless. Okay? So that's what I'm trying to bring it to your attention. Okay? Never, ever. Nobody's done this. Nobody's considered this. Not United States, not UK, nobody. But we are in a position to think about it seriously. Okay? And you know that especially the spent fuel pool, okay, is very vulnerable. It does not have, say, containment. Okay? So that's the thing. Let me come back to my number 2 again. Okay, agreement for cooperation between the ROK and the U.S. concerning the peaceful use of atomic energy. Okay? We're running into expiry of this agreement probably next year. And you know what that means? That means we might not be able to supply our own fuel. We've got a reactor, but reactor without fuel, what good would that be? Okay? So as far as the U.S. is concerned, I don't think they have any intention to allow the Republic of Korea to touch upon reprocessing or enrichment. No, no way. But the Korean government is really pushing hard toward that line. So as to me, it looks like it's just parallelized, which never cross with each other. We have to make a quantum jump, one way or the other. Okay? So, you know why I'm bringing it to this nuclear safety? Because that has to do with nuclear safety. Without nuclear fuel, we cannot be talking about nuclear safety. It's totally meaningless, isn't it? So we have to be really thinking or having this into our consideration sooner rather than later, seriously. So that's number 2. And then third, again, my short memory. Oh, Nuclear Safety and Security Commission. I'm not sure if Professor Chang is around, but it turns out that the Republic of Korea is going to be the only country across the globe, okay, where the regulator and basically developers or promoters might be working all together under the same roof. To me, it's like having the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission under the same roof with DOE, Department of Energy. Isn't it funny? Serious business. That has a lot of implications to nuclear safety because, okay, let me rephrase this. It's like a situation where the policeman, is working under the same roof with the drivers. How can he or she take care of these drivers when she or he goes mad? Is it possible? Is it doable at all? I don't think so. Okay? Actually, last year, Japan turns out to be the only country in the world that is this kind of situation. But now they are independent. Okay, you know, June, you see what the situation. But somehow, we started earlier, and there was a trigger, Fukushima accident. And we did have an independent nuclear safety security commission, but somehow, they screwed up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Nuclear Safety and Security Commission has to come back to where it started from. So we're making at least 3-year retreat back to where we started from. So this is really serious business because, you know what, regulatory is supposed to be watchdog. Last year, they've been more like lapdog or pet dog. I keep broadcasting this, and I got pretty much damned by them. What are you talking about? But I think I was right. They were not doing their job. They were supposed to be watchdog, not a lapdog. No honeymoon with the KHNP, but they somehow had it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to come back to where they started from. It's wrong. So for one way or the other, for one reason or the other, they have to come back and become independent. Without this independence, we got no hope. The nuclear power plants in Korea are in real danger. Again, clear and present danger, number 2, okay? That's really, really serious. That's really threatening the safety, basically security, as well as safeguards of our nuclear plants. It's a must. We got to do something about this. Again, sooner rather than later. Okay, number 4. Apparently, I'm doing my best. Oh, shortage of manpower and operation maintenance, because you see we're really expanding our nuclear program. Okay, home and abroad. As you can see, we got 23 in operation, and actually 2 are sort of out of service because of its own problems or actually difficulties, Ujin and Hwasong. But there's a 4th one waiting for operation. It's already constructed, all done, but it's not getting started because of all this public acceptance or concern, all this. So what I'm trying to get to you is that we got about almost 30 nuclear power plants in operation, and we are really currently running short of manpower as well as resources. So what does that mean? It means that now we have only 60 or even 50 personnel stationed at the site instead of 100. What does that mean? Lack of eyes. What does that mean? Lack of surveillance. So there's a hole, there's a loophole. We got to do something about this. Real, clear, and present danger. Number 3, as I see it. Okay? So we got to do something about this. Again, sooner rather than later. Actually, June, as our Mr. Chairman has already alluded to the probability. If it comes to accident, instant disaster, it's just a matter of probability, frequency. U.S. suffered, okay? Russia suffered, Japan, France are okay. We are next. There is no reason that we are going to get by this problem. One of these days, or maybe years, who knows what? We should be prepared, okay? We have these good personnel, but apparently we are running out of this manpower, shortage of good manpower, qualified ones, as of resources. So that means, as far as I can see, again, clear and present danger, number 4. That has to be done one way or the other. Without this, we cannot really get out of this turmoil. I believe that everyone, almost everyone of this, in this room must be aware of the fact that Korean nuclear power plants really suffered. Probably we hit the bottom, okay? And everyone in this business is trying to, did we hit the bottom yet? Or do we still have to come down? How far? So we really need to get out of this mishap or disaster, one way or the other. Actually, it was most dangerous or actually alarming than the Fukushima accident. Actually, Fukushima accident is becoming, celebrating, it's not celebrating, but having its second, what was it? Coming March 11th, was it? Okay. So anyway, anniversary is approaching, but again, we have to be prepared for our own plans. And what next? Okay, let me just try to wrap it up. We got no exit strategy. No exit. No nothing. What do I mean by that? We are totally unprepared if it comes to decontamination, decommissioning. We are totally unprepared. Everybody's talking maybe 20, 28, 20 years more, 25 years from now. No, it may not be the case. You know what? The Kiwani plant, which is the exact replica of Korea Unit 1, has been determined to shut down, okay, for mostly economic reasons. Who knows what? Korea 1 might be the next. Then what? We're totally unprepared. We have had no exit strategy. No exit. There's no exit strategy. We're totally unprepared. The only experience, Trigger Mark 2, 3, we're talking about totally different kind of ball games. It's totally different. Research rate is small, tiny, versus 100,000 megawatt electric. It's a very different story. So we should be prepared with, again, exit strategy, one way or the other. And again, sorry, last but not least, is there any Chinese on the floor? Chinese nuclear plants. Actually, during the time of Fukushima, we benefited a lot from what they prevailing westerlies because those winds were basically transporting those radioactive materials over to the Pacific Ocean, over to the West Coast, et cetera, et cetera. But if there's anything going wrong in China, we are under direct impact, maybe within half a day. Okay? So it's not just our plants. Chinese plants have to be really considered. They've already got maybe 15. And they are going to have almost as many as 80 plants. It's a big country. Okay? You have to face the reality. So we got not just our plants, but their plants. So, Jun, sorry about taking so much time. I didn't think about this, but anyway, just time flies.
Very intriguing.
Thanks very much.
I think, thank you very much for your candid view. I think each of these comments or notes included very intriguing points of discussions. So taking the privilege of a moderator, I'd like to start asking questions and also taking advantage of candid opinions by Professor Su.
Okay.
You kind of summarized and itemized the real dangers quite clearly. So, but some of those are not ready to be answered here because direct stakeholders are not here. But for some questions, for some points, there are actually an expert who can answer or respond to those. Well, let me take one out of these points that Professor Su made. But the one point I'd like to take is the comment that in Korea, if I understand correctly, the regulator and promoter are working together.
Are about to be working together.
Yeah.
Starting from 25th February, if anything does not change, then that is going to be the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that somehow overlaps my comment as well. But I just gave a failure example in Japan, which is said that the regulatory capture. So if and independency issue. So and. No one actually touched upon this issue, but the recent scandals, data falsification. I think we can understand all these in the same context, but Dr. Lee could be the person who can respond to this. So I don't want you to put you on the corner, but could you share us some your view about this?
You say that regulator and promoters come together here. Yeah, maybe he is a regulator was a promoter. When we make seminar some technical side, we are talking about together promoter and regulator. That is good. But when you are reviewing and decide, that's alone, the regulator alone, they decision making. That is the only one way. But another thing, when the technical, we are learn and learn, that is we are come together talking about that in this kind of forum. Yeah, we are somebody we are confusing that then. Come together here. That is also that some say that what I say that they come together eating or some negotiation or something. We don't have anything else. That kind of things. That's my point of view.
Okay. Well, so simply put, there is no worry.
I just for example, yeah.
Okay. Professor Su, any response to this?
You were talking about this merging of these two, enemies. Say, actually, I was probably exaggerating a little bit, but I'm pretty much uncomfortable about this situation because, you know what, regulation is a regulation, okay, and then industry and promotion is a totally different story. We cannot do both. You just take a look back at the US history. Atomic Energy Commission that got divided into DOE and USNRC some 30 years ago. I don't recall exactly, but now, so anyway, I believe there might be a way around this problem, one way or the other. Maybe they can come up with some kind of bright idea. I don't know. But if I just take a look back at what has happened during the past several years, then I do see there is a potential risk involved. And I believe that that's more risky than the risk that is being proposed or posed by nuclear power plants in this republic. Okay? So as I see them, they're good enough. Okay? They've done more than enough. It's now a matter of trinity. If it comes to nuclear safety, there are three things: plants themselves, and then manpower, personnel, and then culture. I think they're fixing the culture as well as facility. But this regulation and this manpower business has to be done by the top VIP, nobody else. So she must have a better understanding of this. This is different than information and communication technology. It's a totally different story. Different animal that we're dealing with.
Okay, well, certainly there are lots of questions, so I'm kindly trying to activate your thinking right now. I'll set aside some time for questions later, so please save your questions. The second real danger pointed out by Professor Su was manpower issue, and that is something you can respond, because you're a professor.
I'm not a magician. I cannot really rear like hundreds and thousands of engineers at a time. It may take time. It'll come over the years. But the thing is that there's apparently a lack of consistent assistance or a move forward in this direction. Okay, but with this kind of situation, broadening industry and business and regulations just following it, then I believe there might be some kind of point at which both parties may unfortunately collapse. That's what I'm really worried about. Okay, so I'll be doing my homework, but I need help from everybody else around.
Okay. Well, one last point that I'd like to make before taking the questions from the floor. Dr. Kim mentioned about the government role, increased government role. What do you think would be the area that the government should increase its role from your study on public perception?
Well, in fact, before the session started, Dr. An asked me, so do you think the Korean nuclear facilities are safe? And my answer was, as a poster, the most hated answers, I don't know, actually. Well, I'm not a nuclear expert. I'm just relatively know from the, what the mass media reports. And then it gives me all kinds of information, which is very superficial, I would say. From that, I can really know that one side is say it's safe enough, it is the most reliable energy source, so we need it. The other side, I mean, look Fukushima and what the Japanese government did, and how much trust do you have, and do you have higher trust than the Japanese people have in Japanese government, in our own government, which is clearly not so. So basically, I think that it is not just probably the agencies dealing with the nuclear power plant. I think it's a Korean I forgot the English name, but so it's not just a problem with that, the particular area, but it's the whole kind of government problem, actually. I'm working for the Policy Institute, a think tank, so I have to see it from the policy making process. So not just this field, but it have to enhance the trust level of the government. I mean, the trust level in government is really, really low among the Korean people. For example, the National Assembly, probably the lowest, and then the government and president are relatively okay, because there was the number of people who support the president. And that's one of the most important thing and should be done, the foremost thing. And then, well, as I said, we need more information. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a highly intellectual person, but even I cannot really know what's going on that much in detail. I mean, I'm the person who is working in the policy institute. Then what do you think about the general public of Korea? Trust building is the most important thing. In order to do so, that you have to give enough information, not just the one-way direct information, but have to communicate, and which was probably the least capable for the Lee Myung-bak government to do. So that is one thing. And I think in that sense, and then the political parties are very important. No major, as I mentioned, no major political party is making it an issue, political agenda. It is rather a subsumed issue. During the election time and during the whole the government period, no one really want to raise the issue because it's too sensitive, maybe because it can be interpreted in many different ways or misdirected. So it seems that to me, the politicians and policymakers would like it to be, underneath. No one wants to touch it because it may intrigue a lot of responses. They really unexpected. Maybe this is time to raise the issue because it's inevitable, and we're going to see it going to be very important in the course of the future. So it is time to attack the issue and really seriously approach how to resolve it and in the talk and discuss and with the people.
Okay, well, we can continue this forever, but let me start taking some questions from the floor. Yes.
Won Pilbaek from Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute. Thank you very much for your nice talk. I have some comments and questions. First, the title of this session is How Safe Are Nuclear Power Plants in South Korea? Nobody actually talked about it. I hope to hear your opinion on the actual safety level compared with the nuclear power plants in other countries or compared with the other electricity sources. That's the first question. The second one is that I'd like to point out something about the safety culture. In East Asian countries, the organizational culture is heavily dependent on the top managers. The national culture is heavily dependent on the president, and the culture of each organization heavily depends on the thinking of the top manager. But I think nuclear safety culture should be strong and should be consistent, should last without heavy impact from top managers. That means that we need some instrument to maintain the safety culture of important organizations, regardless of the top managers. I'd like to hear about your opinion. The next thing is that, the discussion should be based on the exact information. For example, when we talk about the nuclear accidents in China, we should first evaluate what would happen if Chernobyl-type accident happened in China. It's the role of experts, the professors and the organizations. Probably the level of radiation exposure to Korean people would be around several millisieverts or 10 sieverts. It's an unusual situation, but it's not a very, very too big exposure. Probably if you provide the exact information before the events occur, and if you assess the impact before the events, then we could avoid unnecessary confusion. But if without that, maybe the stress may induce much more death or illness than induced by the radiation itself. Therefore, we should prepare and we should provide the exact information, not just talking about the some subtle or unclear impact. We should prepare for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments, questions? And I will let the panelists respond to those together. Yes.
Thank you. Lee Jung-il, I'm very happy to see you again.
Korean language.
We met the first time in 1996.
Yeah, maybe a long time ago.
Many years ago, yeah. I have some questions perhaps you can explain to me, or if it's too long an answer, then you can point me to a non-Korean open source that'll give me the information. It concerns the response of the Korean safety community after Fukushima. We know very well what happened in some countries because it was a very highly transparent process of asking questions and drilling into the safety record in the history of safety upgrading and regulation of nuclear power plants after the accident. And they focused on particular aspects of the Fukushima accident that came to light immediately after. I'd be very interested to hear from you what you can tell me about what happened in Korea regarding investigations of the following issues: flooding, loss of heat sink, and loss of on-site and off-site power. These were issues that in Europe, where I live, there were very rigorous reports involving TSOs for all of the regulatory agencies that were directly reporting on this in very long reports. And I'd like to know something about the Korean process, briefly, and then perhaps you can tell us something about what the results of that effort were, if there was such a exercise. What did they come up with? In a nutshell, when you look at the European results compared to the results that emerged from NRC activities after the accident, there are some interesting cultural differences, and one of the differences is the reliance of European regulators on a very consistent process over a period of 30 or 40 years of design lifetime to upgrade the design basis of the reactors. And in the United States, there has been, in my view, a reluctance to address design basis. The effort has shifted more, perhaps because of the input of operators that are interested in maximizing their economic performance. There's been a reluctance to drill into the issue of design basis, and instead they're looking at alternative solutions to improve safety in the areas that I mentioned. And I'd be very curious to say if you could very briefly explain what happened here in this country. Thank you.
Okay, so we have only 5 minutes, so all together, let's respond to to all the questions somehow.
Sure.
Okay, so Dr. Lee, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good question, but it's difficult to
Very tough.
respond here. But I'm not sure in detail. But before Fukushima, after TMI, we tried to make a CB action policy statement, but that is not regulatory rule, but the policy. And then we adopting for the prevention of CB action, we applied the hydrogen igniter. Yeah, that also design basis for only the design basis action hydrogen combiner, but we already involved the hydrogen igniter for prevention of CB accident. Also, we take care of the CB action management, manual and procedure. We all take care of recovery. And also, after Fukushima, I already mentioned it, more than 50 items were identified and implementing. Now it's implementing that. Also, the CB action, the penetration or flooding system, and also the investment experts cooling. Maybe he's a expert here.
It's right on my alley.
Yeah. Also, the Dr. Beck, he's here. In detail, he knows that. But anyway, we are safe for the prevention CB action. We have a lot of things to improve the equipment and also strategy. Before Fukushima, and after Fukushima, we were also another item to it, the tsunami and the seismic safety, and also when you go to the Kori site, we that barrier more than 10 meter, we already installed that. And this is all in our regulatory authority. Will take care for the prevention, also public communication, transparency. One more experience. Lunchtime, today Italian food with Slovenia for safety and security. We are talking about that 3 points. One is design improvement before and after Fukushima, and also importance in the human capability and human being. Also educate, training, and attitude to organization and people. And also third point, transparency and public trust. That is important things. Maybe your question and I make answer maybe roughly, in detail, maybe in late time you're talking about that. Thank you.
Professor Su?
Let me add on to what he said, was that basically the government is trying to pour in about $1.5 billion to the existing plants as well as some things to be built in the foreseeable future. And that includes not just those, but also some of those, what they call severe accident management guidelines, like investor retention, core catcher, you just name it. And one of those has to do with the extended battery lifetime. And if it comes to what we're developing new, that we are supposed to go 72 hours, 3 full days, without any external power, okay? And there is another, like a transportable fire engines to supply water whenever it is needed, wherever it is needed. So that's the part of the story that he has worked on. And also, last but not least, the government is really trying to look back at Korea Unit 1, which is the oldest in the nation, okay? And trying to go through the European style stress test so that we're going to give it a hard time. A lot of external conditions, possibly including a big physical impact, not just earthquake, not just tsunami, but something more than that. Okay, so that we are moving in the right direction. But thing is that we have to do some compromise between investment versus cost-benefit analysis. So that's something that everybody has to come up with his or her best ideas to make a working version of the guidelines.
Okay, well, we still have a homework from Dr. Beck.
Maybe he wants some grade.
Grading of our reactors.
I'll give 98 out of 100. We missed 2%. It's
okay.
How safe. But those remaining 2% is really critical. You know what? 100% versus 98 is it's night and day difference. So I talked about culture, safe culture, and I alluded to personnel. Those are perhaps unresolved issues, but have to be closed. Again, in the foreseeable future, then we might reach 100%. Actually, I have a capacity to remember only one question. What the other two? There were 2 other questions.
Well, maybe let's save it for the coffee time. But
okay, sure.
Very quickly, Dr. Lee, could you give your grading for the Korean reactors about the safety?
Safety?
Yes.
Just keep doing and try to. I do my best. Take care. Safety.
He's the regulator.
Okay.
So
I don't want to say the 100%.
Okay.
Try best.
I'm a
Dr.
professor.
Kim.
I very much like the term that Dr. Lee used. The safety is not just technological term, but it's also social term. As the session description said, more than 30% of electricity is generated by the nuclear energy in Korea. And so this is not the time that whether it is safe or unsafe, but this is time that we talk about how to make it safe and also assure the public of its safety. Improving technology and enhance the safety level at the force and the proceedings, all the discussion, I think it should be done by the experts, not in my field. But what I would suggest is, well, whether this is an issue, the debating issue between the NGO, civic organization, and some academic scholars, and versus the government. I would like to suggest that it maybe have to be the political issue, but not the partisan issue. It should be approached as a whole, but not the ideologically split or in any partisan way. And also NGOs and also civic organizations. I know that what they are saying and what they're aiming at, but rather at this point, at this inevitable situation, we have to more focus on how to terminate and remove all the nuclear reactors in Korea, but rather how to make it safe and make the better environment for the Korean public. So that's probably the starting point that we can agree upon at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you very much for your participation.
In the foreseeable future. And that includes not just those, but also some of those, what they call severe accident management guidelines, like investor retention, core catcher, you just name it. And one of those has to do with the extended battery lifetime. And if it comes to what we're developing new, that we are supposed to go 72 hours, 3 full days, without any external power. Okay, so, and there is another, like transportable fire engines to supply water whenever it is needed, wherever it is needed. So that's the part of the story that he has worked on. And also, last but not least, the government's really trying to look back at Korea Unit 1, which is the oldest in the nation, okay, and trying to go through the European style stress test, so that we're going to give it a hard time, a lot of external conditions, possibly including a big physical impact, not just earthquake, not just tsunami, but something more than that, okay? So that we are moving in the right direction, but thing is that we have to do some compromise between investment versus cost-benefit analysis. So that's something that everybody has to come up with his or her best ideas to make a working version of the guidelines.
Okay, well, we still have an homework from Dr. Beck.
Maybe he wants some grade.
Yeah, grading of our reactors.
I'll give 98 out of 100. We missed 2%. It's
Okay.
how safe. But those remaining 2% is really critical. You know what? 100% versus 98 is it's night and day difference. So I talked about culture, safe culture, and I alluded to personnel. Those are perhaps unresolved issues, but have to be closed. Again, in the foreseeable future, then we might reach 100%. Actually, I have a capacity to remember only one question. What the other two? There were 2 other questions.
Well, maybe let's save it for the coffee time. But
okay, sure.
Very quickly, Dr. Lee, could you give your grading for the Korean reactors about the safety?
Safety?
Yes.
Just keep doing and try to. I do my best. Take care. Safety.
He's the regulator.
Okay.
So
I don't want to say the 100%. Try best.
I'm a
Dr.
professor.
Kim.
I very much like the term that Dr. Lee used. The safety is not just technological term, but it's also social term. As the session description said, more than 30% of electricity is generated by the nuclear energy in Korea. And So this is not the time that whether it is safe or unsafe, but this is time that we talk about how to make it safe and also assure the public of its safety. Improving technology and enhance the safety level at the force and the proceedings, all the discussions, I think it should be done by the experts, not in my field. But what I would suggest is, well, whether this is an issue, the debating issue between the NGO, civic organization, and some academic scholars, and versus the government. Well, I mean, I would like to suggest that they maybe have to be the political issue, but not the partisan issue. It should be approached as a whole, but not the ideologically split or in any partisan way. And also NGOs and also civic organizations. I would like to, I know that what they are saying and what they're aiming at, but rather at this point, at this inevitable situation, we have to more focus on how to terminate and remove all the nuclear reactors in Korea, but rather how to make it safe and make it a better environment for the Korean public. So that's probably the starting point that we can agree upon at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you very much for your participation.